Welcome back to the Village News Weekend Review. I'm your host, Adrian Shropshire, along with our co-host, Anoa Changa Peck. Welcome back, Anoa.
Hey y'all, really glad to be back. It's a lot moving and happy to help break it down.
So we are less than 90 days, Anoa, away from the November 3rd general election in this midterm season. But even though all eyes are kind of on November, we're actually still in primary season.
Yeah.
So there are still primary elections happening around the country. And so we had some primary elections this week. We'll talk about those. The Senate, because they all need to get home and either campaign for themselves or campaign for their friends and allies. They said deuces and bounced from Washington, D.C. this week for a very long summer recess, but not before rushing through a late night and early morning vote, making Trump's personal lawyer the new Attorney General of the United States. Probably, I believe, the most unqualified person to ever even be perhaps nominated for this position. Very dangerous. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more as well.
I don't even know if that man would be qualified to be a magistrate judge. And in some places you don't even have to be a lawyer to be a magistrate or a practicing
Right,
attorney, right? So
right.
yeah, I could never.
None of us could ever.
None of us
None
could
of us could
ever.
ever. Right. For
Yeah.
none of the cabinet positions that people have been nominated for and have no business
He,
being
he's
in them.
he's arguably one of the worst. And like you said,
Yep.
one of the least qualified. He's even worse than Bondi, who he replaced, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's what we were thinking when it happened. And that's what keeps happening. He has these people, and then their replacements are horrible.
Far
Um,
worse. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Well, that's obviously the reason why this midterm election is so critical and so important is because there is a way that if Democrats are able to take both chambers, which is not, it's not out of the question, that they would regain the House and regain the Senate majorities, and then it's a different ball game, right? Like you're actually not getting people's nominations, people who have no business being in these positions. They're not getting confirmed through a Democratic Senate.
Right.
But let's talk about this week. So we had some primaries this week in Michigan. Huge one. Lots of conversation about that. In Missouri, where there were some congressional races, but there was also two really critical ballot measures
Yeah.
in Missouri that I'm not sure that people were tracking so much. I know the people in Missouri were. We had primaries in Kansas and in Tennessee, which I know that lots of people were paying attention to, and we'll talk to one of our friends from Tennessee later on in the episode. But what surprised you? Were there surprises for you?
I mean, I think the biggest surprise was the way, just like the headlines and the takeaways from everything, because we saw
Uh-huh.
some really impactful wins for Black elected officials between both Missouri and not Missouri, but between both Michigan and Tennessee.
Hmm.
And there seems to be this trend to just reduce everything down to be like the DSA thing or the new Mom Donnie wave, right?
Right,
it's
right,
very
right, right.
lazy. But we know,
Yes.
and then also this other thing about like, oh, the Black establishment, like as if Black voters are the problem. I know it's something that you
Hmm.
have done work around and talked about plenty of, for years, but like Black voters and the voting patterns we have, no, we're not a monolith, but they exist for a reason. And just like to reduce everything to like Black people are the problem because they won't get with the new progressive wing when most of the progressive stuff came from like a lot of our organizing and work years past
Anyway, yeah.
failed. So yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing that really like kind of like was like, oh,
Well, I think it's important to talk about. So let's just lift up what specifically you were talking about, right? And so we know in Michigan there was a Senate race, and it got sort of characterized, right, as Abdul Al Sayed, right, against what the progressive in the race, although lots of people wanted to say he's DSA, and he's like, I'm actually not DSA. I'm just progressive. against a candidate that was being put forward and supported by what I guess folks would call the establishment Democrats, which is really sort of, the ways in which these terms are being defined are actually unhelpful
Yeah.
in many ways, right? And so Al Sayed wins, right? He wins the race. Black voters in Detroit throughout Wayne County support the other candidate, right? And so then this debate starts to happen about whether or not black folks are centrist, whether or not black folks are establishment, whether or not black folks are opposed to progressive Democrats or opposed to DSA. Um, and I agree with you, and I will echo what you said, which is that is so lazy. And it feels to me like another attempt to just discredit black voters. And I'm not sure who thinks they're gonna win, or who thinks that they're somehow going to get an advantage by attempting to discredit black voters. But it is a wrong-headed strategy. You cannot simply say that black folks are establishment or they're centrist. And frankly, other people need to do their work, right? If you're not getting the kind of black voter support that you think you should be getting, then honestly you need to be doing more work in the black community. That's how that works. That's how elections work.
Other voting block but us catches strays like this, right? Like
Right.
whether the person is a progressive, whether like whoever the nominee is, we show up regardless, overwhelmingly. Even with the dip offs, when you look at like, oh, people have switched or whatever, it's still overwhelmingly, right? No
Yeah.
other voting block gets the strays. No one else gets this hyper scrutiny. And like we were saying, it's like people also will go towards like it's a trust thing. It's very relational in our communities too, and it's the same in other communities, but we're the only ones who get judged for it in this way. And like people, like if you have the trusted messengers, people have relationships, folks can say, well, that's the issues and this, that, and the other. That's cool, but if I know you, if my
Hmm.
mama knows you, my grandma knows you, I am more likely to support you if I'm just looking at stuff that people are saying I don't know. And part of the problem too is like when we've had all this massive disinformation the last 10 years and the way
Yeah.
people have like come at black voters, like in terms of the targeting, it has made it also like very difficult to figure out like what people are saying, what makes sense, what works. And we're also assuming that everyone's hyper plugged into like all these niche, policy debates. I just want who's going to show up for me and mine. If my granny or if the pastor down the block is saying this is the person, that's what we see happening. And it's not that black voters can't support or won't. We've seen countless examples where the opposite is actually true. Like, but like here, I mean, literally, we're talking about Michigan, right? We're talking
Hmm.
about the home of John Conyers. John Conyers, who is
Hmm.
actually one of the co-founders of DSA, right? Like
Hmm. Right.
we're talking about congressional like progressivism. Like you don't get more progressive like in a certain era than John Conyers, right? I mean, the
Right.
single payer healthcare that we give credit to or people give credit to Bernie Sanders was actually originally a bill that John Conyers introduced and carried for years
Right.
that Bernie
Right.
was a
Right. Right.
co-part
Right.
of. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it is very reductionist, but we don't really get into like the organizing, the base building. And I know this is something that your work has really touched on, the way in which people show up late to us. So if you show up late to
Hmm.
us, or you don't think you have to talk to us at all, um,
Yeah.
like that's the problem. My one concern though is like when we have wins like this and it's like, oh, well, this person won without really engaging black voters. Like that's cool, but that's a primary, right?
Yeah.
The way
Hmm.
primary electors, but when we're talking about the general, you still need to do your work. You still need to do your work.
Well,
Black
I
folks.
think that what you're raising though is important, because it is like, what is the lesson that people take away from these things?
Yeah,
And I don't think that, I mean, even when we look at Tellerico in Texas, I don't think that the lesson that he took away from his primary win over Jasmine Crockett, nor do I think El Sayed is taking
yeah,
away from his primary win, that, oh, I won without black voters, so I don't have to engage them. I think that
yeah.
each of them immediately were like, yo, we can't win without you. And immediately began to engage and to talk about it. But also we saw El Sayed come out and sort of reinforce his values, right? His platform,
Absolutely.
the issues that he cares about. And those
Mhm.
are obviously issues that black folks, black voters, not just in Michigan but around the country, care about as well. So
Yep.
some of this is like there are some people I think outside of those campaigns who want to try and draw
Yes,
some other
that's
lessons
that.
right
Yes,
from
that
this.
part.
And I
Yes,
think that that's the thing about like whoever thinks
yes,
that they're going to gain from driving such a message that you
yep.
can win in states where black voters will be decisive, that you can win without them. No, no, no. That is not true. But roll the dice, I guess, right? But I don't think that's true of these candidates, right? But we also saw some other really great some other really great races and some great news coming out of other states as well. And so Tennessee was one of those places where all eyes were on Tennessee. Tennessee was the first state. No, well, there was sort of the Louisiana Tennessee kind of double hit
Right.
after Calais when uh, immediate racist maps start getting redrawn. We saw the mobilization that happened in Tennessee almost immediately when they lost their sole black congressional district. And so there was a lot of eyes on Tennessee. What's going to happen in this race? And fortunately, we have a lot of great friends and allies in Tennessee. And one of those is Tequila Johnson, the co-founder and CEO of the Equity Alliance and the Equity Alliance Fund. And she's going to join us now to talk about what went down in the primary race in Tennessee.
August 6th, Tennessee voters went to the polls. We had a primary election. There's a lot at stake on the ballot, but it wasn't, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tequila, that it wasn't just the ordinary election. Not that not that anything is ordinary with elections in Tennessee. I'm in Georgia, so I already know how to get down.
Yeah. Whoo.
Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the results and just what made this election cycle hit a little different maybe than some years past?
No, we've been building for a while here. One of my friends told me yesterday that the whole country is experiencing what it feels like to live in Tennessee based on the national political climate. A lot of the things that you hear being spewed nationally that people are like, oh my God, this is crazy, are things that have been implemented for a decade in Tennessee. And so, we are in a Republican trifecta, Republican governor, and we've been that way since about 2008. So over a decade, we've been in a trifecta, and it is something that has spilled over into a lot of our local elections as well. We have not had, in a lot of our suburban counties, many like Democratic commissioners or school board reps, and so it has just been a fight. It has felt like a uphill battle in Tennessee, and this election was very different and very different for a lot of reasons, which, in May, when they cracked our last black led Democratic congressional district into three in Memphis, we just thought, like, oh, wow, it's either the beginning or the end. Either way, we're going to continue to fight. And so we fought like crazy just to see how much people would turn out for someone like Rep. Pearson. And even though the polling and everything suggested that Pearson was, within the margin of error, going into that race still felt very heavy for several reasons. We were looking around the country and we were seeing all of these amazing, as people are, calling them mini mandomnis, or um, all of these candidates that were bold and outspoken and different and something that represented change and younger and just all these things. And a lot of them were very successful. But in the primary, what I saw, and I would love to hear your take on it too, is that a lot of them that ran in like majority black districts were not successful, especially when they were running against another black person that was backed by the establishment. And so Justin was not backed by the establishment, but he was backed by movement. He was backed by all of the grassroots mobilizing organization leaders. He had a lot of labor endorsements, a lot of national endorsements, but his opponent, London Lamar, had every what I would call establishment Democrat endorsement in the county, from the mayor to former Congressman Steve Cohen, Hereford Sr. It was going into there, it felt like something is either going to change or we're going to see that we have the same fight that's happening across the country. And so as the results were coming in and I was looking, he was winning every district, rural counties at 69 and 50%. I was shocked. And the thing that I held on to was I want to see how well he performs in Shelby County. And I just remember seeing the early vote numbers come out, and she had like 5,000 and he had like 13, 14,000. And I think what that did to me in that moment is said that we are in a position where we have built a true multiracial coalition in Tennessee. We have not had any swing state battleground dollars coming into the state. So everything that we have built has been purely relational. It has been purely reliant on our grassroots movements, and people were coming up to me in the airport saying, "Oh, I saw your video," or "Oh, someone knocked on my door from you all," and things that just, it just felt really good. And so seeing that, and then knowing we ran a slate of 5 Black women in Clarksville, Montgomery County. One of the things you should know is Nashville has been highly gentrified. And while the Black population has maintained steady, it has pushed a lot of people into those donut counties surrounding Nashville. It's about 8 of them. So we've been going into these more suburban and rural counties and organizing, and we ran a slate of 5 Black women, and all I was told, and the polling said that maybe 2 of them would win, but all 5 of them won.
Wow, clean
Mer-
sweep. Oh, I love
yes, a
this.
clean sweep. Rutherford County, where Turk, which is the immigrant organization that we partner with, was really involved out there in some of those elections and knocking doors and doing calls out there. And the whole school board flipped from a Republican school board to a Democrat school board. Yes.
Really?
Wilson County, which is a heavy, I think this district won, Trump won this district 20 points,
Okay.
elected 2 Democratic commissioners. This has not happened since 2000.
Oh wow. That was my
And
first election.
Tennessee is
2000 was my
Tennessee.
first election. Oh wow. Oh wow. That's a little while ago. Oh wow.
Yeah, so the pendulum is swinging. And the pendulum is swinging. I don't think it's just swinging to Democrat. I think it is swinging towards everyday working class folks and the middle and upper middle class folks that believe in a fair democracy, that believe that we all should have access to the ballot box. And like that happening on the anniversary of the VRA was just, it felt ancestral,
I love
if I can say so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that, right? Like, I really appreciate because I know coming into this, I was going to ask you about obviously the VRA anniversary happening on August 6th, the same day as the Tennessee primaries. And like you mentioned earlier on, Congressional District 9 being, we talk about cracking and packing and like erasing Black political representation and power, right? And like kind of what that meant. But you went into a whole other history lesson over here, geography lesson, breaking down some of these powerful wins in, these rural counties, which one, is definitely a case study, and Democrats could definitely take some lessons and talk about like, how do we talk to the people in the rural areas. But like one thing you touched on before we talk more about like how y'all were building the coalition and what the impact this has, when you were talking about how like people are like talking about like folks like Representative Pearson or like there are other folks who are running. We saw some amazing wins also this week out in Michigan. Folks are like, oh, these are little Mondanis, they're all the DSA style candidates. You know, being in Tennessee with the legacy, right, of like movement of grassroots, and let's just get real, like there's a whole lot of skin folk who was progressive before progressive was positive was the popular thing to do.
Mhm.
Like, does that kind of take away from like, does that framing, right, does that take away from, and it's something that the media does, right? But does that take away from the real story and the real power building of folks like you and other people in coalition who are actually doing this work and have been seeding the ground? Like you said, seats flipping for the first time in over 25 years in some instances.
It's really difficult for me to answer that question in real time, only because I live in Tennessee. I mean, I live in the South, I live in Tennessee. We've never been a state that got substantial national attention for anything related to an electoral victory. I mean, the majority of our work has been highlighted because of resistance, I tell people all the time, we're not a red state, we're a resistant state. And if people really want to learn how to combat fascism, you have to look at states that have been dealing with this for decades. So it's really difficult for me because I don't see us as a state where mini Mondomini is a framing. And I think even Pearson didn't run a mini Mondomini campaign. He ran a black progressive campaign. And I think even in the new, like this new framing around race class narrative and this new framing around socialism and just really trying to figure out how to create another like coalition of people, I think what Pearson did was something far greater than that,
Mhm.
because it is not easy to unite Southern Black people around progressive and radical change. He did it in a way that didn't center national ideology, it centered people. And I think when you really focus on people, the issue isn't going to sound the same in Tennessee as it would in Michigan or in New York or even in Georgia. Memphis isn't going to sound the same as it would in Nashville. But when you center the core of humanity, right versus wrong, good versus evil, people united around just pure good intention, it creates an opportunity for people who may not feel compelled to talk about the war in Gaza or compelled to talk about a lot of, or even understand or relate to the socialist ideologies, to feel like they belong and that they are a part of something bigger, because it don't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, all of those policies and all of these political arguments are very valid and they're real. But when you are talking to someone who cannot feed their children in America, when you're talking to someone who is deciding between gas and their life-saving medicine, their mind can't expand enough to connect their struggles to someone across the ocean. And they want you to talk to them right there.
Yeah.
And they're open to being educated about why these other things are bad. They're open to trusting you at a federal level to make foreign policy decisions because you've shown them that you make good decisions about the things that are at their doorstep. But I think nationally, in order to really build this true multi generational coalition in the South, we got to figure out how to talk about the issues at people's doorstep while also acknowledging a lot of this foreign craziness that's happening. And I think Justin figured out how to do that in a real way. That feels real. It feels like Memphis. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like New York.
Mm, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then just like, what's the, you talked about some of these county commission and, school board, these local, like, cause local elections, right? We get local. It absolutely matters. We saw the rightward shift in a lot of places in the country in the earlier part of this decade, right? With the Moms Liberty or whatever groups, like, turning up on folks and book bans and stuff. So can you talk some about like these local wins and what the impact means for not just voters who showed up or the communities, but just even for people's sense of belief in what's possible.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time since Tennessee has gotten some real like wins where you can look at them and you can say, oh, wow, things are changing. So I think it does restore a sense of hope to people. It does let people see that all this work we've been doing, especially people who are actually doing the work over the last decade, it's paying off. I have my staff read a lot. We do a book club, and we had to go back and start looking at when did, because in 2006, pre-Obama, Tennessee was not in a supermajority. The supermajority is not that old. And so, but the diligence and the patience that the Republican Party had when they took over state legislators is something that we don't talk about. We talk about what they're doing wrong. We talk about the need to change it, but we don't talk about how long it took to get there. What did we not do to get there? What did we give up to get there, right? Where did we fall in terms of investments and organizing in order to kind of open the door for this kind of stuff to happen? And talking about that and connecting that to a real tangible win at a local level. And let's be real, a lot of these local people that won, these aren't people that are like career politicians. These are directly impacted people, moms who ran because they couldn't, no one would explain their child's IEP to them. Like, these are people
Oh,
who
yeah.
have been directly impacted by these policies that are speaking from a place of personal experience and connecting that to real policy change. So when you get to see people who reflect your community, reflect the issues that may be impacting you as well, be in a position to start to reflect the change, it's just it's an unexplainable sense of hope.
Yeah. Just like, thinking, looking forward, right? How are we stepping into the next era? How are you all stepping into this next era and phase of work? Pulling in some of those lessons, like you talked about sustaining the wins or holding their ground, or also finding the hope and the
Yeah.
inspiration where possible.
I think we are entering into, and I really hate using these cliche words, but I'm gonna try to give some meaning. We're entering into a political renaissance. And I say that because we're in a space where people are open to creating new things and not just doing what has always been done. And I think that is important because when you look at, I'm a millennial. I have lived through the Obama. I mean, I tell people all the time, my organizing fire is still burning from the 2008 hope and joy that I received from seeing and being a part of organizing around getting the first Black president elected. I am still riding off energy from 2008. But when you think about that from a aspect of how we have, watched this fluctuation in American politics, it is traumatizing. If we were if we were to apply that to like our job or our childhood or any other aspect of our lives, we would be in therapy, and they would be telling us to, get some coloring books or something and try to figure out how to create a different model of what we want to see, doing shadow work. And when you apply those therapeutic terms to politics, it feels strange, but we have not done enough political shadow work. We have not went back and healed that thing in our space that led us to the thing, right? So it's really hard for us to come out and say, let's be authors of a new nation. Let's think about how to rebuild this thing when many of us have never revisited what broke it in the first place or what destroyed it in the first place or what hurt us in the process in the first place. And so that piece of the work is where we are sitting. We are sitting with the ugliness that while we love Al Gore got comfortable and over 2 million people moved to Tennessee in the process before he ran for president that he didn't know. We're sitting with the fact that the South has been extremely underinvested in. We're sitting with the fact that nobody can figure out how to organize Black people because they want to organize us around ideologies and not our lived experiences. We're sitting with the fact that we are in a coalition where we don't all see eye to eye, but we're being forced to believe that we are all going to organize around this one thing without ever addressing things like racism. So we're having to sit with some uncomfortable truths that would probably get me canceled nationally if I said them, because we cannot move forward if we don't do that deep work. And I think that is the thing that is going to move us a little bit more into capitalizing off of hope, because we're not capitalizing off of a false sense of hope. This isn't us. We're not love bombing voters with this idea of Justin Pearson and he's going to come in and Memphis is going to be a different city. We are being very honest about what healing and what restoration needs to happen for our people. We're being honest about the level of intent, the level of strategy in the long game that it's going to take to get there. And we're inviting people in to be a part of that movement, not just when an election is happening, but for the long term.
I have so many notes and thoughts, and we're definitely going to have you back to help unpack the electoral shadow work that is necessary. It gave me the love bombing, like, woo, sis.
So you got to think about it we have to humanize the impact that politics has on us. We can't keep looking at it as us and those people. No, we are broken by the system. Do I think the system is broken? No, I think it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, just like a
Yeah,
love bomber. When they come in your life, they do exactly what they intended to do, but that doesn't mean it hurts you any less because you know they had bad intentions. You know what I mean? Like, we are broken by this, especially as millennials. We have lived through turmoil emotionally, mentally, financially. We can't get houses. We are mad. And if you like me, you did everything they told you to do. I went to college. I didn't get pregnant. All the things that they said do in the 80s. I didn't do drugs. I did them. And here I am making a decent salary, still trying to figure out how to have a better quality of life. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A whole sermon, a whole word. I appreciate you so much. Tequila Johnson, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for
Absolutely.
coming in and dropping some science, some knowledge, just really just letting it, and we're going to find space for you here at the village so that we don't got you getting canceled in on the national spaces. Uh, come on, sis, to the village. But this is. Can you tell folks where they can follow you, find you, learn more about your work and the work of the folks that you're building and organizing with?
Absolutely. I feel like I wear so many hats. But you can follow me on social media at Tequila Johnson, and that's on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok and YouTube. If you want to learn more about my work, you can visit our website, www.theequityalliance.org, and you can follow The Equity Alliance on all social medias at The Equity Alliance.
Well, that was great. I just, I always appreciate tequila. I love tequila. Tequila's always going to tell it straight. Whether or
Yeah.
not, whether people want to hear it or not, she's going to tell you what needs to be said. So I appreciate that. And again, like she mentioned, and as we talked about earlier, the ninth congressional district is the result of one of these post Calais gerrymandered maps, right? That the Tennessee Republicans created that effectively just took out the last remaining black majority district in the state of Tennessee. And that, essentially meaning that black folks can't choose their own representative. Black folks can't decide who they want representing their community because the community itself has been broken up so that folks can't have a collective voice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say what surprised me, what now having talked to Tequila, like I know what surprised me, getting more context, right? Which is why it's so important, to get people from local communities and the states themselves to talk about it. It's just like also the flips. Like, yes, seeing the
Yeah.
congressional race, see people show up, and I've been reading from other friends in Tennessee or from Tennessee, like their takeaways and analysis. But like the map is very different than what certain politicals and folks make it seem like. But looking at these county level wins that Tequila talks about, flipping a
Yeah.
whole, a whole school board in a rural county, things that haven't been done like this
Right.
since 2000,
Right. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Calais, we thought like, people might have thought like, oh man, but just the way people are standing up, now, what,
Hmm.
4 months later is impressive.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to see what happens in the midterms going forward.
Well, yeah, well, less than 90 days. I don't know what the exact, maybe if you could just flip on the little tracker on Google and
I need to
find out
get one. I think
exactly
it's
how
like
many days are left.
87. I think we're like 87 days away or something like that. It's
Because it is
wild. We,
about
we, we
to
need to
go,
get it. We'll get the date together for y'all. But yeah,
it's going to
it's
go by
going.
super fast, right? And so, I think that folks need to get prepared. We're always saying to folks, check your registration. There's all kind of shenanigans going on. Get yourself prepared and ready to be able to cast your vote. We also had, I'll just touch on one. So the one other thing that I would say that is this question, this issue of ballot measures. So
Yeah.
we know that there are ballot measures. Some states have ballot measures, essentially meaning that citizens can put something on the ballot for voters to vote on. And in Missouri, this week, there were two terrible ballot measures that got defeated. One of them was an effort to say, by Republicans in the state, to say you can't have ballot measures no more. Citizens can no longer collect signatures and petition to be able to get an initiative on the ballot. They try to take that away from citizens, and this has been a long time coming because the Missouri state legislature and its governor has not liked the kind of ballot measures that Missouri citizens have been winning on, whether it's abortion or whatever. They've been winning some really big issues through the ballot measure process. And so the Republicans in the state legislature were like, well, we're just going to take that away from you. You're not going to be able to put stuff up there and let voters vote on it. But no, the voters of Missouri said absolutely not. We will keep our right to be able to directly go to voters and do direct democracy and say, do we want this or not? So that was a huge win.
Yep.
That, you know, kudos to all the organizers in Missouri who made that happen. The other thing that we saw this week and all was actually the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. So as we
Yeah.
talk about Tennessee and Louisiana and Mississippi and all the states, right, that where maps are likely to be redrawn, South Carolina and others, we also have this kind of somber anniversary. There's a great piece in the at the Village. Media.com by Judith Brown Dianis, who joined us the last time we were here, talking about how this is kind of a somber anniversary when we because it's, you know, sort of the Voting Rights Act doesn't really exist anymore, given what the Supreme Court has done over the last
On paper.
decade, right? And so, or more at this point, more than a decade. And so we, you know, approach this anniversary and the, you know, sort of what do you do with that, right? So I think she says it nicely in her article that part of how we need to be thinking about this is recommitting ourselves
Yeah.
to the fight for, frankly, our constitutional rights.
Yeah. Thinking about Judy's piece and then listening to Tequila talk, there really is a reframing. And I know we've had this conversation before about like, do we think about this or we don't want to demoralize or demobilize people, but like
Yeah.
I really do appreciate the voices right now. They're like, hey, okay, yes, this has happened. It's been all these years, but we got to lock in. And this is what the lessons are as we move forward, right? At the same time, we have what's happening at the federal level, right? We talked about Trump's bestie, favorite personal lawyer becoming our AG. He's also begging SCOTUS to help him take over elections through mail ballots, right? He has his executive order. He wants them to go ahead and let him just enforce it on the country. And we're, like we said, less than 90 days, and he wants to fundamentally change for some states, like your state of California, Oregon,
Right.
Colorado, could be a major change. So it's a lot moving, but like having people stay vigilant and understanding how things are shifting is really important. And it's why we talk about it.
Yeah, and so I think the thing about that too is that it's important to note and remember that Trump is losing on these cases.
Trump is
So
losing.
yeah, I think it's Michael Elias said, you know, has a little running tracker on Blue Sky. I think it's like 0, and 21 at this point. So he's really losing on these cases, and it is a sign of the state of affairs in the United States of America that a sitting president with less than 90 days to an election is still trying to change the election rules, right? Is trying to rig the election with less than 90 days. Like that is a sad statement about where democracy is
And he's
in
been doing it
America. And I
for
know,
over a year. It's been over a year that
yeah,
he's been trying to do this,
yeah,
and he still has been, and he's been failing. So he
hmm
escalates every time.
yeah. Yeah, and like we constantly say, don't know that it clearly it is not going to happen. But at some point, maybe one would think that Republicans themselves, whether they're at the state level or at the federal level, would say, like, enough. You've gone too far. I mean, there have been some times when they've done that, but not in any real way.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the kind of fundamental principles of American democracy that they can't even stand up for.
Right. I mean, he's making it more difficult for people to just do the basic thing. Election administration used to be something that folks did not think of at all. Right.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
just like we rolling through. We know that there are issues with the purges and things like that. Like we know that's a problem, but we're talking about like basic, like vote by mail is so
hmm
widely accepted and done. These are just regular, run of the mill things. Trump himself votes by mail.
Right. Votes by mail himself. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's definitely it's something, but like, Trump is doing what he's doing, and this is why it's also important for people to know what's happening. So you can go to your local county boards of election or registrar, however it's organized in your state or the state meetings, and make sure your voices are heard. What are the organizations who are doing that work? Because he can keep trying, and like you pointed out, Adrian, he's losing in a lot of these cases.
There was a lot that happened in the week. It feels like every week is actually a year. But we will continue to keep folks up on what happened in the week that you might have missed, or things that you might want to just hear a little bit more about. You should go to thevillagemedia.com. There is tons of information and articles in there on things that happen throughout the week that feel important in terms of our ability to like stay up on what's going on, stay woke, as they used to say back in the day, before some folks stole the word and turned it into something else. But we want to make sure that you all are tracking with us, and we will continue to try and stay on top of the news so that you can stay on top of the news. Anoa, any last words?
Yeah, just like, share, subscribe, drop a comment, and please make sure to follow along the Village Media on all the platforms. We're on IG, YouTube. Yeah, engage with us. We're moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, this has been the Village News in Review for the week. We will see you next week.